Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Diego Quinones. I'm one of the managers for the Personal Finance Manager project for the INSO class of 2024. And today we're going to be doing our presentation on our third and final milestone. So overall, the main theme for this milestone was just house cleaning. And as a matter of fact, for the most part, this presentation is going to be an overall look as towards the project, how far we've come, what changes we've made, what struggles we've found along the way. So initially our project started off, like all the projects, as a suggestion on the forums of the class. And overall, the main purpose of this was to help a user maintain their financial discipline through the way of software. By that, I'm trying to say that our goal was to empower our user to be able to track, monitor, manage, and improve his finances by using what is basically data science, so the user can see where his money is going, how it's being used, and what it's being used for. So let's go over all of our features that we initially planned out for the project. Obviously, as mentioned before, budgeting your finance. The user needs to be able to know how much of a pie he's working with, tracking his financial behavior, because the user needs to know where each slice of his pie and what percentage of the pie is that slice it's going to. In other words, he needs to know where his money's going and where his money's coming from. We also wanted the user to interact through any device. That was solved rather quite quickly because, of course, nowadays we just use the web. So it became a web app fairly quickly. We wanted to be able to notify our user when he's on track and be able to reward him when he's on track and when he's committing to the actual process. We wanted to be able to show this to the user by way of data visualization. In other words, being able to show them charts, analytics, and so on and so forth. So one of our biggest challenges at the start was just getting organized, because at the start, at least for our first milestone, we're putting out a lot of fires constantly. So here we can see our divisions. So for our first milestone, we had 3 teams, which wound up being the visualization, login, and data entry. And you can see how they all kind of evolved into what they are now for this and the previous milestone, which is the calendar system, the data analysis, and the page structure team. Now, we added another team for documentation, because everyone's grades will admit that not having that documentation team during the first milestone hurt us a lot as a team, because we weren't able to produce the documentation that was needed and required for a project of this scale and size. In other words, we had a lot of developers, but we didn't have a lot of people writing down how it worked, why it worked, and overall what the application was intended to do. So again, going back to the organization topic, here we can see some of the tools that we use to communicate with each other. So initially we used Discord, and you can see that the only change between milestone 1 and milestone 2 is to swap from Discord to Teams. One of the reasons why we swapped to Teams from Discord was that Discord was a little informal. It was hard to get everyone on Discord. It was hard to record our meetings. It was hard to document things using Discord. Whereas with Teams, all of these features are built into the platform itself. So let's talk about some of the challenges that I mentioned previously. So over here, the first one we saw from Cloudflare to Firebase. Initially, our database was set up as a Cloudflare KV, but eventually we found out that had some limitations, so we decided to swap over to a Firebase, because on top of that, a lot of our developers were already seasoned with the Google suite of tools. Then, obviously, we had the documentation issues that I mentioned earlier and the organization issues that we mentioned earlier, which ended up being solved by overall just communicating more effectively, schedule meetings, and the platforms that I mentioned previously. All right, so let's talk about our features. So login and sign up was essential to our application, because we wanted this to be a asynchronous process for the user. In other words, the user can access the platform through any device of his choice. So in other words, we had to store everything on the server side, and we had to make sure that the user could easily and securely access such things. So before, as in our first iteration, we simply had a simple login page of Google and Facebook, whereas in the after, we have a more fully fledged, much prettier to the whole thing. Obviously, here we can see we have email and password, which is a traditional way of signing up, while we still maintain the Facebook and Google sign up. Let's talk about the data visualization as well. So here we can see all the types of visualization that we gave the user. So here we can see 2 types of bar charts, a pie chart and a line chart. So going back to why this is important It's important for us to be able to communicate to the user in an easy way, which is the hard part. Doing this in an easy manner, an easy way that the user can understand what's happening. So here's our main page, our before and after. We changed the color scheme. We made it more modern and bloated. So let's talk about how our user can get around. Going back to the philosophy that I mentioned earlier of making things easy for our user. Here we can see the menus. We have 4 buttons at the top, as you can see: home, graph support, and calendar, along with the sign out button. And then we have a menu to the side, which holds the home, the calendar, the graphs, and the settings, as mentioned earlier. Now let's talk about our calendar team a little bit. So the purpose of the calendar, as mentioned earlier, was with our overall design, just making it easy to track things. And a lot of times money doesn't work like that, but for people, it's a lot easier to visualize how our expenses are happening if we can see that X day we spent Y amount of money, and so on and so forth. So that was the main purpose of our calendar, and to make this as simple as possible. So we can see a progress bar for our calendar system. This is pretty much just so that the user can keep track of their budget, how much they've spent. Before, we had a fairly simple calendar, which was the user just scheduled everything through dates and an event system inside of the calendar itself. So moving on to data analysis. Well, overall data analysis was working a lot with our numbers. So what data analysis was meant to accomplish was to turn all of the raw user data into metrics that we can actually measure and quantify. So what data analysis needed to do was take the user spent $50 every week and translate that into things like mean, median, and mode, which are things that can actually be graphed, quantified, and shown to our user, and to make this easy for the rest of the development team to work with. So here we can see the data entry system, which is what the user uses in order to input an event. So here you can see the income amount, the description, the date and time that this happens, and obviously it's stored in the calendar. So here we have one important thing is description, because descriptions actively helps the user to remember what this income or expense was. And it'll in the future, it helps us if we want to implement other things like some new buzzword like AI. So a description like that is extremely helpful. So in a way, it's a very forward-thinking design. So with encryption, the same gist as before. All that we're doing in order to simplify things, we're allowing the user to enter a symmetric encryption password on their device, and all the encryption and decryption happens locally. In other words, in the Firebase, we have a JSON, and the values of the JSON are encrypted with AES 256-bit encryption. And what ends up happening is that whenever we're going to send data and update that value in the Firebase, it's encrypted before it's sent, and then that encrypted value is what's stored inside the Firebase itself. And whenever we're pulling a value, what is pulled is the encrypted data, and it's decrypted locally on the user's machine. Alright, so as mentioned before, one of our biggest hassles with this whole project ended up being the documentation side of things. So here's a little meme that we can all agree on, that documentation usually takes longer than actually developing the project itself. So here's some of our lecture topic tasks, from risk analysis to Petri nets to TLA. I'm sure the professor would love for me to talk a lot more about these, but to be fair, I'm not too versed in them. So that's really all I have to say on the matter. Overall, the project, I would consider it a success. To my end, we ended up accomplishing what we set out to do, which was to allow and empower our user to take financial pertinence and responsibility for their own finances. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Cesar, and I'm going to present the work that all the team has done through the semester, and I hope that you find it very well, and hope you like it. The first thing we are going to discuss is the sign in to our account. As previously said by Diego, we have different options for signing up, but then I always like to use the Google account form because it's easier to manage. Alright, so the first thing I must do is to put my account. So just my UPRM account. put my credentials over here. And now I'm logged in to the application. Some of the things that we change from the second milestone to the third milestone is that we now have implemented a navigation system. So now the different part of the projects can be accessed through different tabs. And these are features that we already discussed from previous milestones, but then we are going to discuss it again. So we have some categories from things from video games or the things that you would like to spend, and then you will see that you have some models after pressing these buttons for putting your information and overall all the data entry system, putting the amount that you earn from and a description from it. So in this case, it's probably that you earn $100 by a paycheck, and you can always select the date that you're currently in. We also have an income history, and we are able to delete some of them. Alright, so when I put the add entry, we have a little notification over here saying that the transaction was already put over the database, and when we click the X button over here, we see that it increased $100 more. So as the same as before, we are going to make a expend in a video game. For example, let's say the category of video game and put expenses, and that updated our new balance. We see that when pressing this button, where we show the analysis table, the income and the different information we got from the analysis. We can change from expenses to income over here. Right, so when we press this button, we can hide our expenses to make the app more cleaner to the eye. Let's see the other features. So when we press the graph button, at the same as before, now we have all that information in a separate page, meaning that when pressing this information, there are some highlights, and some of the things that these graphs have improved is in the sense of now we can choose our data depending on the month that we want to see. In the case of January, we can see that there's no information available for January because basically because this is a test, and right now I'm as a user I have not put in for any information over there. But also if I press 2024, I can see all the information from the whole year. When I press over the pie chart, again I can choose from the different month, and there are some animations that we use to make it seem better. And finally, there is the bar chart, and we can change from view expenses and view income. And also there's a line chart over here. We can see how the information evolve through a time series. The calendar system have improved the overall front-end aspect of the application, but let's see some of the features that the team has worked on. When we press, for example, a square in the calendar, there's some model on the left that we can see the event for that specific date. We can add another event when we put $100. When we put 100, and if I put submit, there is a notification saying that first we must put a description on it. So there's $100, but on what? So in this case, yeah, there's more expenses in the house, right? So more house expenses. We put submit. and that has already been put it over the database. Alright, so there's also a budget system that we can see over here with a progress bar. How does it work? When we press the button, it shows a model, meaning that monthly budget for April. There's currently a budget for that, but then let's say that I have a $500 budget, and through the calendar I will only put the expenses I plan to make, meaning that we can see over here the current budget, but now it increased. We can confirm the submission, and now the budget has been successfully updated. And also for the calendar, we can also choose the month we want to work in, and again the budget is only for the month. So when we change the month, it went to 0. And now if we want to exit the application, we can just sign out, and we have the login page over here again. Another thing that I didn't discuss was the create account feature, meaning that we can put the exact password that we want. If we want to confirm it, put our mobile information. I'm not going to do that, but then if we put login over here again, we go to the main page. And finally, I want to thank everyone of the project who contributed, and I hope that you like the presentation. Thank you to everyone. Bye.